started. We're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing decimals. This is a review. So the first thing we're talking about is multiplying with decimals. We have to remember what you guys mess up a lot of the times is that you line up the numbers, not the decimal points. So you need to ignore the decimal points and then you can multiply. In this problem right here that I have, 23 and 2/10, we are multiplying by 300. And I have lined up the numbers, but I've ignored my decimal places. And our next step. So we have to solve the problem. Let's go ahead and solve this together. 2 times 3, 6. 3 times 3, 9. 2 times 3 is 6. I don't even need to multiply in this place value because it's 0 and we know that it's going to equal 0. I have to count the decimal places next step in both factors. That's another thing that we mess up on from time to time. So I'm counting in the first number here, 1. Counting in the second number here, 1, 2. So I've got 1, 2. Adding those together, I have 3 decimal places all together in both of those factors. Now I'm looking at the product in our next step here. And in the product, I need to move the decimal, the total spaces in each factor. So my total spaces is 3. I'm moving it over 3 spaces. Take my decimal place here, move it over. 1, 2, 3. And I have my answer, 696 thousandths. All right, let's continue. All right, I had a light bulb moment here. So I want you to remember that if you multiply a decimal that is less than 1, your product will be less than the other factor. So whatever that other factor is. And right here, we had that on our quiz. It was actually kind of a bonus question actually on one of your guys' tests. And let's just review that. 4 times 1 equals that number. So you get 4. If I multiply 4 times 5, I'm basically splitting it, or 0.5, I'm sorry, multiplying 4 times 5/10, I'm splitting the number in half and I get 2. So this is a decimal less than 1, and you're going to notice that it is less than 4, your other factor. Let's move on and keep discussing that. 4 times 1/10, your product is 4/10. It's less than the other factor, 4. And one more example of that is 4 times 3/10, and your product is 1 and 2/10, and again, that's less than 4. So that's just one of those number sense things. Quick check. If you get an answer, you need to ask yourself, does it make sense? If it's a number less than 1, a decimal less than 1, it's got to be less than that other factor. Moving on. Here are your practice problems. Practice them. Come into class tomorrow with them. And if you have any questions, go back, review your notes, look at your notes. We've already gone through this one time. This is just a quick check. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's continue moving on. All right, decimal quotients, no more remainders. We are bigger and badder, and we've learned more than just putting a remainder. So we need to remember which number is the dividend and which number is the divisor. This is one of those things that stops us up. So it's dividend divided by the divisor, and that equals the quotient. So setting it up, remember that the dividend lives inside the house, and Mr. Divisor lives on the outside. And that's how we get the quotient. So we're going to start here with 60 divided by 5. Let's solve this together. How many times does 5 fit into 6? Once. Multiply, place it down below, subtract, I get 1, and I bring down the 0. Now, how many times does 5 fit into 10? And that's 2, and I actually don't have a remainder for this one, so we're going to keep moving on and see that if I have a remainder on one of our next problems. All right. Here are your practice problems. Remember, this is what I want you guys to remember, is that when you get to the point that you would be putting a remainder, you have to add a decimal and annex a 0. So let's do this first one together here. So I'm going to make sure that my divisor's on the outside, my dividend's on the inside. All right. How many times does 20 fit into 3? Doesn't fit in, so I'm going to add a 0. How many times does 20 fit into 36? 1. Multiply. And I get 16. Now I'm going to bring down my 8. How many times does 20 fit into 168? So let's just do some rounding here. I'm going to say 20 times what would equal 162? 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. You guys think this is so funny. All right, that is 8, and that gives me 160. I need to subtract. I get 8. Stop right here. I don't want a remainder. I want a decimal. So I go ahead and add my decimal point, which allows me to annex a 0. Bring it down. All right, now how many times does 20 fit into 8, or 80 divided by 20? That is 4. I'm going to multiply, and once I get 0, I'm done, or I see a pattern. So your answer is 18 4/10 for number 1. I also wanted to mention to you bar notation. Remember that you have to put a bar notation over a number if you see a repeating decimal or a repeating pattern. Moving on. Blank sheet of paper. All right. Decimal in the dividend. So remember that if there is a decimal in the dividend, all you need to do is move it up to the quotient. So I've done that here before. First number, dividend. Second number is your divisor. Always remember that your dividend lives inside the house. Divisor is on the outside. If that decimal is in the dividend, it has to travel up so that it is in your quotient, so you may begin solving. So go ahead and do this one together. 15 fits into 3 5 times. I get 15. Subtract 0. Bring down the 5. And 3 goes into 5 one time. Now I don't have to add another decimal because I already have a decimal in my quotient. I'm going to add a 0, bring it down. What do I do right here? Oh, I have to subtract. Oh, look at me catching my mistakes. 2, bring the 0 down. And you guys may continue this problem. Moving on. All right, here are your practice problems with your decimal in the divisor. Move it up into the quotient before you begin. Moving on. Decimal in the divisor. So it's going to change if it's in the divisor. You slide the decimal over so that you have a whole number. So our problem here is 14 divided by 7/10. I have to slide that decimal over. I need a whole number here. I slide it over. And whatever I do to the divisor, I have to now do the same thing to the dividend. So I've slid it over. Do I have 7? I start at my whole number, wherever I'm at. I have to slide that over. That little space right there represents that I have to add a 0. So when we solve, we have 7. On the outside is my divisor, and now I have 140. And then you can continue from there. So go ahead and practice this. I've kind of set up this first one for you. 60 divided by 2,500. Remember, divisor on the outside, dividend lives on the inside. Slide the decimal over. How many spaces to make a whole number? 1, 2. Same thing to the dividend. Start here at the whole number, move it over. 1, 2. I'm adding in those zeros. Your new problem is 6,000 divided by 25. So go ahead and solve. All right, here are your practice problems. Remember, now I have put a decimal in the divisor and the dividend. And you always have to remember, whatever you've done to the divisor, you have to do to the dividend. Excuse me. So my divisor is 1 2/10. I have to slide it over my decimal place so that I have a whole number. If I've done that to the divisor, I have to do the same thing to the dividend. So I'm setting my problem up now. 12 is on the outside as the divisor, 426. And now I may solve. So remember that whatever is to the dividend, same thing happens to the divisor. All right, do these practice problems on your own. If you get confused, go back, review your notes that we've taken in class. And good luck.